Tucker Murphy, welcome. Thanks for being here. You are the administrative officer for the town of New Canaan and the former executive director of the Chamber of Commerce. We've got a lot to cover, so let's start from the beginning. Tell me about growing up in your family.
I was the youngest of four, grew up in Greenwich for the most part, was born in Massachusetts. Both my parents were from Massachusetts. My father was relocated to New York when I was 3. We moved down. My mother actually wasn't happy about the move, leaving her family. She was one of 11 who were all up there, but she knew that this was probably a good move for the family. And when we got there, she just was so happy to be able to raise our family there. And we had a great growing up. Grew up in a great neighborhood. I had tons of friends, and we played outside all afternoon when we could. And it was just sort of a perfect little childhood, really.
Your mother was deaf. I find that so interesting when I learned more about you. Tell me, what was that like?
Well, first of all, I think that explains why I talk so loud. Everybody says you talk so loud, and it was because my mother was deaf. She had scarlet fever when she was 3. And being the middle child of 11, she was the 5th one down, 6th one up. It was probably the best thing that ever happened to her because she ended up getting so much attention, where she might not have, being one of 11. So went deaf, 95% deaf. So obviously, married and with kids, we all had to figure out how to communicate with her. And back in the day, they used to she did have a hearing aid that would help, but she primarily read by reading lips. But she did have a hearing aid that was like a transistor battery that she would wear in her blouse, and it had a cord that came up to her ear. But these were her ears. So whenever you wanted to talk to her, you had to go right there to talk to her. My friends would come over after school, and she'd be talking on the phone this way, and everybody thought she was a little crazy. But that all really just led to who my mother was and how she persevered. She was a ballet dancer. Her mother would stand behind the stage and tap it out for her so she could feel the music to dance. It never stopped her. And if you met my mother, you would never in a million years have known she was deaf.
That is incredible. Great story.
It was fun.
Growing up in Greenwich, it sounds like you had a very interesting childhood, a little different than the average person in town. You had a young career as a child actor.
I did. I think I was probably 4 years old. My brother was 5. We were little towhead, a year and a half apart, basically. My 2 older sisters were a couple years older than that, but we had a babysitter who lived right around the corner from us. And she actually had a modeling career. And we were over at her house one day, and her agent, I guess at the time, stopped by to drop off some paperwork and saw my brother and I and went to my mom and said, "Your children are so adorable. Why wouldn't you consider putting them in television or modeling?" My mother was all over that, and so that's how it started. And we did a lot of, early on, we were involved in a lot of print things where my brother and I appeared together. And then mine just sort of took off for television commercials. I spent most of my childhood, all the way off to going to college, doing television commercials.
Did you go into the city to do all of this?
This is a crazy story, but
Yeah.
I was the youngest of 4, so my mom had 3 other kids at home that she would have to deal with. So many times I would be at school and I would get a note from the principal saying that your mom's picking you up early, which was kind of a bummer as a child when you had plans to maybe go and do something with friends. My mom would pick me up. She would have a little outfit in the car. She would dress me. She would put me on the train by myself at about 9 years old with a little baggie with a wet face cloth to wash my face before I walked in, a couple of bucks for anything that might come up, and I would walk right out of Grand Central to 666 Fifth Avenue, do my thing, and then come back, and by then my father would be coming back on the train, and I would usually meet him. But 9 years old, I was heading into the city by myself.
That's incredible. I loved hearing about the Twinkie cupcakes commercial.
Yeah.
Talk to me about that.
That was probably one of the biggest ones that I did, in that it landed in so many countries, put me on in the Screen Actors Guild and all of that. So we were astronauts, and we literally had to fly around in the studio. They used the original Peter Pan harness for me, and I had this big, astronaut's helmet on, if you will. And we had to, for a 60-second commercial, took about 3 days to film, and I had to keep taking a bite of a Twinkie, but they didn't want me to swallow it because they knew I was going to have so many bites that I would get sick to my stomach, especially wearing this harness. So every time I took a bite, I had to spit it out, but I couldn't get it through the hole of my little astronaut's helmet. So they would just down my neck, and by the end of the day, I must have had a lot of Twinkies down there. But to this day, when I see a Twinkie, I have a little queasy stomach.
That is so funny. Now, you did commercials all over the world.
We did. We traveled to some faraway places. I even was in a commercial with Doris Day. She was supposed to be my mother. It was a Colgate commercial. And the funny story on that one was that it was for Colgate mouthwash. I was supposed to be playing in the house. The dad was to walk in. Doris was my mother. She was doing something in the house. And every time Dad walked in the door, I was supposed to run Daddy and jump up in his arms. And first take, we did it, and I backed off. And they said to me, what was the problem? Nothing. Second time, like this. So finally, they sent my mother in after about an hour of me doing this. And they said, what's the matter? And remember, we're doing this for a mouthwash commercial. And I said very loudly, he has bad breath.
Oh my gosh.
Off to the big box of Colgate mouthwash, and they gave him a swig of that, and it all worked out. But yeah, I went all over the place, and we had a lot of fun doing it. And my mom would travel with me, and I cherish all that time we spent together.
That is fantastic. I love it. Now, after high school, you went on to University of Vermont.
Yes.
What was that like? And that you have a love for Vermont, so
I
talk
have
to
a
me
love
about
for
that.
Vermont. My father's family has long history in Vermont, which is where we still spend a lot of our free time. I'm an avid skier, so certainly when I was looking at colleges, skiing was a big part of wherever I was going to end up. And Vermont just felt right. My mother went there. My grandfather went there when he served in the war, so I had a lot of sort of family history there. And what better place to go off to college? And I studied sociology with a minor in political science, and I did it actually in 3.5 years versus the 4 years. I had some credits coming in, and I'm a little sorry to this day that I rushed through it. I wished I had done like what my siblings had done and maybe gone for the 4.5-year plan, but it all worked out, and it was a great place, and I'm still very rooted in Vermont.
So a little political science there. Was that the beginning of your interest in politics?
I actually think the beginning of my interest of politics. My parents were never involved. I don't have any family members that were really involved, but I remember in high school working on a couple of campaigns just for fun. And then when I did go off to UVM, I was very involved in George Bush Sr.'s campaign. And so always had sort of this interest in politics. And then, of course, moved to New Canaan and got very involved locally.
After college, you moved to New York City for a little while. What did you do in New York?
I was in the Executive Development Training Program of Lord & Taylor, which was a great program. I'm still friends with some of the people that were in it with me then. And, did just the great fun of being in New York as a young professional. Worked there for a couple of years and then came back out to Connecticut and took a job doing sort of executive search and starting a temp placement agency in Stamford.
I think there's a great story about how you met your husband the first time and the second time. Tell us about that.
And he would tell you a very different story, actually. But the first time was, again, I was in Greenwich High. I had a very good friend whose cousin was at New Canaan High, and we concocted a plan one weekend where I would propose to my principal that I could come up and go to New Canaan High School for a week and shadow her and watch all of her classes, and that she would come to Greenwich and do that with me, and then we'd write this big fancy elaborate report about how they were different and unique and all of this kind of thing. It was really just a way to get us to spend more time together. And I remember walking into the high school, and John, my husband, was sitting on a table in the lounge with his big, long, blonde hair.
And multiple layers of shirts and the work boots.
Timberland boots.
Yeah.
And
I went to
that's
high
what I remember
school with
seeing.
your husband,
Exactly.
so I know exactly.
You knew him before I did. But so that's the first time I ever laid eyes on him. And then fast forward to getting out of school, and we were all working. He was with IBM in Rye, and we were all working in that area. And there was a lot of paddle tennis and things like that. And so that's where we connected the next time.
And you have 2 children.
2 children, a son and his wife, who are 30, and they are just moved back here from Santa Monica, which is great. And then a daughter who's off doing her thing in Guatemala. She's physically here right now, but she does live in Guatemala working for a nonprofit, and proud of her. It's hard, but we're really thrilled that she's doing what she wants to do.
That's such a difficult thing for you, I know, because you're so close to your family. What kind of advice do you give Rachel when she's away?
The first thing is I just say to her every day, just be safe, which is just what I think any mother would say. But I want to say to her, come home. But I also say I so respect what she's doing, and it's not about me, it's about you. And she's not doing anything that she shouldn't be doing. She is following her passion. She's doing what feels right for her. And so I just tell her, keep it up, but just be safe. Just promise me you'll be safe. And call your mother.
Yes. Tucker, your niece had a very difficult birth. and gave birth to Poppy, which a
Poppy.
lot of the community is very familiar with Poppy. Can you tell us a little bit about that story?
So my oldest sister passed away of pancreatic cancer 2 years ago. And a couple of months after she passed, her daughter, my niece, was pregnant with her second child and decided she needed a little bit of a break. And she and her husband and their daughter that they had, who was 4, decided to go for a quick vacation to Mexico. Doctors had said it was fine. She was early on in the pregnancy, 4 months. Got to Mexico only to go into early labor and deliver a baby at 1.6 pounds, Poppy.
In Mexico?
In Mexico, on vacation, obviously completely frightened of what was about to happen. Called me. She normally would have called her mother, but I'm sort of now the surrogate mother. Hopped on a plane with my other sister, literally in about 3 hours, and got there to not really sure what we were expecting. We weren't sure if this baby was even going to be able to be born, but we were more concerned with Maggie's well-being. Anyway, Poppy was born at 1.6 pounds. We spent the next 3 days working through all the bureaucracy of immigration to get her airlifted out to a proper child's hospital. They had no ventilator for her. One of the things the doctor asked me to do when we arrived was to, in broken English, basically was to run to the street and buy some saran wrap, run to the store and buy some saran wrap. I couldn't understand why she was asking me to do that, but I went and did it. They had to make basically an incubator for her, and they needed to keep the oxygen in, so they were using that. It was just a tiny little sort of hospital in Cancun. So after 3 days of not sure if Poppy was even going to make it, we were successful calling in all the favors that we could call in. At one point, we hired medical transport at the tune of about $30,000 to come and get her, only to have the Mexican authorities call us and say that they've closed the borders and to turn the plane around, which we had to do. I really don't know if anybody thought that Poppy was going to survive, but Poppy is a fighter, and she did. She made it to Miami, to Nicklaus Children's Hospital. She spent 4 months there. Oh, I'm getting the goosebumps telling the story, because that day when that ambulance took her away in a neat little, they called it a nest, so that it had air pockets to support her as she was driving, because obviously bumpy roads and that kind of thing. And she took off. We stayed with Maggie in Mexico because she couldn't fly, because she'd had surgery. But we all just sat there on the pavement and just sort of fell into a heap. And Poppy is now a thriving 2-year-old who I just FaceTimed with her last night, and she calls me Lovey. That's my name. And she's, hello, Lovey, hello. And they're in Arizona, so I don't get to see them as much. But I'm telling you, Poppy is on this earth for a reason. My sister had a lot of the energy around what made her survive. And I've promised everybody in New Canaan, because everyone was so amazing to support us through all of that, that we will have a Poppy parade one day, I promise.
You've had an incredible career of volunteerism and leadership roles in New Canaan. Can you take us through how you've gotten to where you are today?
Yeah. I remember when the kids were really young, and I said to John one night, there used to be a program over at the Y that they had sort of socials for teenage kids, but they needed supervisors to come to those programs, and they didn't want the parents of the kids being there. The kids didn't want their parents there. So I remember reading in the paper that they were actually looking for people, adults, who might want to go and act as chaperones. And I said to John one night, I've got a babysitter, we're going out on Saturday night. And he said, great. And it was about 6 o'clock, and he said, where are we going? And I said, we're going to chaperone a party at the Y. He said, wait, we're paying for a babysitter for our kids so that we can go babysit others. And I said, yeah, because someday someone will hopefully do that for us. And that led me to be very involved in the Youth Commission. And then when my kids were in the elementary schools, I was the PTC president, Young Women's League. And one thing led to another, and I just got involved in everything that I could. Professional volunteer, as many of us are, but I wouldn't change any of it, not a minute of it. It was great.
You're a true leader in the town of New Canaan, and you became the executive director of the Chamber of Commerce when it so desperately needed some appropriate leadership. What happened? How did you get there?
I had been the business manager for a store in New Canaan, Design Solutions, which is now in Pound Ridge, for 20 years. When my youngest, Rachel, went off to kindergarten, I knew I didn't want to just stay home, so I decided it was time to find some sort of a part-time job where I could also be at home. And so I did that for 20 years, along with all of the other volunteer opportunities that I was doing. And I constantly would go to the chamber, and there was a merchants association at the time, and I would say, what if we do this? What if we do that? And some of it would happen, some of it didn't. And I must have said it so many times that when the chamber was looking for a change in leadership, I got the tap on the shoulder. The timing again was perfect. Rachel was going off to college now, so I had even a little bit more free time. And I said, why not? It was 2009. You know, everything that was going on in the country and, with the recession and what have you. And as daunting as that was to take it on at that time, because I had absolutely no experience really doing it, it was also such a great opportunity to start from the ground up. And, that is probably one of the things that I'm most proud of all of the work that I've done in town is build that organization up to be such a viable, relevant, really necessary organization in town.
Were you also on the town council at the same time?
I was. I had been on the Board of Education for 4 years. And I have a funny story about running for the Board of Education back to sort of the first forte into politics. I thought that maybe I wanted to run for something I had been following. I knew I wanted to be on the Board of Education. I didn't love that you had to run for the seat, but I knew it was part of the process. And at that time, there was, I won't say his name, but there was somebody in local government that I really, really respected. He's no longer even alive. But so I went to him one day. He worked in town hall, and I made an appointment, and I went in and I sat with him, and I said, I'm thinking of running for office. And his response to me was, little lady, do you really know what you're getting into? And I walked out of there and I was like, I am now determined.
You're on fire.
To do this. So I ran for the Board of Ed, did that for 4 years, and then ran for a seat on the town council where I was the Board of Education liaison for the town council, and that was another 8 years. So 12 years in total as an elected official.
You had a not so great experience with a gentleman in the town of New Canaan. Were there any women in New Canaan that were mentors to you or guided you?
Oh, plenty. And I wouldn't say it was a negative experience with him, but it was a teachable moment for me. It was something that really set me on fire. As far as women, so many women that I can think of. I mean, we've only had one female first selectman. I'd love to see more in the day, coming up in the future. But many of them who work over there are just to be admired. There's a lot of professionalism.
Tucker, when our first selectman talked to you about becoming the administrative officer for the town of New Canaan, you had some big shoes to fill. Tom Stadler's been in that role for a long time, and he's a wonderful guy. Tell me what went through your mind?
That Tom's irreplaceable, first and foremost. Tom's been doing a job over there. Probably 10 people couldn't pull his job together the way he does it. But really, I've been spending now 2 weeks with him. He's showing me the ropes. I have a lot to learn. I'm not sure I wanted to let him go. He's thrilled to be able to go and retire and spend some time with grandchildren. But the transition is an interesting one because what I was doing, Laura and I were sort of piecing this together at the chamber one day, and I feel that probably about 30% of what I was doing at the chamber was really doing what also is part of my new role at the at town hall. We're adding economic development, a piece of it. I'm certainly not an economic development director for the town, but we want to have an economic development component as part of that office. So what's happened with that job is we've looked at everything that Tom's done over the years, and he's the ultimate quarterback of everything that happens in town hall, and I'm happy to take on that role. But we've also looked at that and said, well, what, just because it's been done this way for so many years, is that how it should continue, or is this an opportunity that we can move things to another department, or should we address it in a different way? So we've been spending quite a bit of time over the last 2 weeks looking at all of the day-to-day and seeing how we can do that, and I'm hoping that it will shore up the position a little bit more to make it a little less sort of behind the scenes and just writing reports, and a little more outward facing so that I can be part of the community, which is what I love to do, and I think what the community recognizes in me.
You've been in your current role for just a few weeks now.
2.
And I think the second day we spoke, and you said you are really having some great interactions with smart and wonderful people.
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
It's funny, being as involved as I've been over the years with Town Hall and knowing how things operate over there, I thought I had a really good sense of how things operate. Now being there from the vantage point of actually being in the building most of the day, I'm blown away at how much that entire building, every department is working. I mean, they are just humming, and obviously there's a lot of pressure with a lot of things that are going on, but now I get to see it from the point of view of being part of that group. And while everybody's got their own little distinct responsibilities, it all comes together sort of at the end of the day. So it is really a well-oiled machine. There's always room for improvement. People are working really, really hard. Trying to work with the community is the most important part, but it's very interesting. Today's day 10, so I'm happy to have survived day 10. The first couple of weeks obviously are just getting used to the technology and emails and all of that, but it's going well.
Everyone really knows you from your role as running the Chamber of Commerce. We've been dealing with obviously a difficult situation with the pandemic recently. Can you give me a story about a silver lining as you were wrapping up your tenure at the Chamber, and how COVID and the community came together, and some positives?
Yeah, I think all of the years of building the Chamber to be the resource that it was, our mission at the Chamber was always to connect the community with commerce. Those 3 words or 4 words really were what kept us going through COVID. We had developed a huge relationship with the merchants and the business groups down in New Canaan, but more importantly is we were trusted, we were effective in speaking with them, and so when we needed to pivot and when things needed to change and when they needed help, they could come to us, we could go to them. We had a direct link to the municipality, and we were able to help. Outdoor dining is a perfect example. I mean, we had to pull that together really fast. The community wanted it, and we did, and I think our downtown has really not only survived during COVID, we've thrived. We definitely have challenges, and because everybody does, but I think we have done much better than most of towns around.
I would agree with that. We've been on several calls with various chamber town leadership, and several have not lasted and not survived. So I feel like we're very lucky here in New Canaan. What kind of advice would you give young women today coming out of college going into business?
Go for it. Don't let anybody stop you. Don't be intimidated. Do it if it's what you really want to do. Most kids, men, women, don't always know what they want to do when they get out of school, and it is by trial and error. We have that senior internship program at the high school, which I was part of the very beginning of that, and I've been on the committee ever since it started. And what I frequently tell these seniors who are going off to college is, look at this as an opportunity to do something that you may not even know it's what you want to do, or it could be an opportunity just to do something that's completely different. But try things out. Nothing's forever. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. It happens. Just go for it, and just remember that you want to be true to yourself. But I think at the end of the day, everyone has to sort it out, and timing does. In my life, timing was a big part of how things worked out for me, and that's just a little bit of fate in there as well.
A big reason why we are here today is to celebrate the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment, giving the women the right to vote. Do you remember the first time you voted in a big election?
I do, and I have never missed an election, and that's one of my pet peeves when people tell me, I'm not voting because I'm not going to be in town, or I don't know who to vote for, or whatever. So I do remember, and I even have better memories of bringing my own children into the voting booth back in the day when you pulled the cord and the red curtain came around you and we'd pull the little dials. It's such an honor to be able to do that, and I hope no one wastes that opportunity to be able to go out and cast their vote.
If you were growing up 100 years ago, would you have been involved with the movement of the 19th Amendment and getting the right to vote?
Absolutely. I would have been in front of the line with everybody else, cheerleading and making it happen for sure.
Recently, Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg passed away. Any thoughts about her and women's rights and equality these days?
I saw something on social media the other day listing all of the things that she was able to accomplish, and a couple of the highlights were that women couldn't get a mortgage, and women couldn't get without a husband or somebody else to co-author it with or co-write it, and that felt so recent to me because of her time and when she was in office, that I can't believe that was actually during my lifetime. So it was more of a shock, but it was also a realization to not take that for granted. I just assumed that we can all do that. And that isn't that long ago, and she obviously had a huge part of that.
All right, a few fun questions. what's your favorite restaurant in New Canaan, or restaurants?
I can't tell you that. They're all good, and I have a lot of go-tos, but it just depends on the day. They all work really, really hard, and it just depends on if you're in the mood for Italian or a burger or whatever. But I really do go to them all, and I really do love them all.
What are some of your favorite traditions in New Canaan?
Christmas Eve, without a doubt, being on God's Acre, having the carols sing, all of the great events this time of year. But I think it would really be sort of Mayfair, God's Acre, and obviously with the chamber, we're in charge of the holiday stroll and those kinds of things. Those were more work for me, but I loved seeing the kids' faces as we had Santa up on stage and that kind of thing. So, and New Canaan is all about rich traditions like that. And for my own children who are now grown, it's funny how they've grown up with so many of these things, like the holiday stroll that we never had, in the town that I grew up in. So certainly all of those fun holiday traditions for sure.
You're on the board of the Tourism and Economic Development Group Committee.
Yes.
What's your elevator pitch for people that want to come into New Canaan, or what is on top of mind for the TDAC group?
We're always trying to promote everything that we have here. We have so many assets here that we feel that many people aren't necessarily aware of. And so certainly getting that out there. And actually COVID has made that a little bit easier to some extent, where we've been able to do a lot more of this kind of virtual thing. People don't have to physically be here, but we do want them at the end of the day to come and visit everything that's going on and take part in all of our events. So our sort of MO is to make sure that we promote New Canaan both as a cultural destination, as well as a great place to live and raise a family, work, all of that. So we work very hard. We had a great meeting last night. We're getting a lot of traction on a lot of elements of things that we've been wanting to bring in, or at least connect the dots on, and that's happening, and it's really exciting.
Tucker, what gives you hope?
People. I mean, at the end of the day, it's really all about the people and people being together and working together. And in a time when we sometimes feel like we're all coming apart, I feel like it's really about people.
I have a quick story, and I want to thank you, because a couple of years ago, I was unemployed and needed a job. And the first person I went to was Tucker Murphy.
Oh, Meredith, yes. And got you one job that tied you over for a while and then landed you in a spot that you were perfect for. So, and I've done that. I was in executive search, so that was easy for me at the time. But I can think of many people in town, because I do think of myself as a connector.
Absolutely.
I love to marry business working with business, people in a job or whatever. So I'm glad that I was able to help you. I'm very proud of that.
Yeah. Tucker Murphy, Administrative Officer of the Town of New Canaan, thank you for being here and being a wonderful leader in New Canaan for us.
Thank you.